of our presentation team. So presenting the solutions for you today is going to be Kylie, who is one of our technical leads and business consultants, Michelle, who is our specialist in SharePoint and RecordPoint, and myself, who will be leading the presentation for you. So before we kick off, I just want to frame, I guess, some of the things that we see in the market at the moment. Records obviously has a long history and will continue to be critical in the future of business. However, you know, when we started with records, we started with very, very limited options for storing records. You know, if we cast the time way back, we're talking about filing cabinets, and paper records being filed by all team members. And those are highly structured. We knew where everything was, and if we didn't know where it was pretty obvious where the problem was, because you would walk past someone's desk and see piles of paper sitting there. So it was pretty obvious.
So other people are hearing, like they're not muted, so we mute that. I think it's conflicting with our audio.
Sorry guys, sounds like we've got a little bit of an echo issue for some users. We'll just try and resolve that now. Hopefully that's resolved the issue. I'll keep kicking on. If anyone has got an issue with audio, just chat through and we'll try and resolve that for you. Most of the content historically, if not all the content, was stored in the context of, you know, a single function, activity, or transaction that created it. You know, if we think of old vinyl albums as an example, we had one album, one band, and generally played sort of start to finish. With the evolution of technology came a massive injection of flexibility and choice. And it's flexibility and choice like we see in our everyday lives. Again, you think about music and the options that we have now and how we digest and manage our music. The reality is it's now part of everyday life, and we just need to find a different way to do things. With the injection of flexibility, it placed more onus on the end users to correctly identify information as a record. The challenge, though, is today we consume more information than we have ever before, and it's delivered to our teams at a much faster pace. And well, for all the records management folks in the room, we know that getting them to comply was effectively like pulling teeth. Which means if we're going to have compliant records management practices moving forward, then we need to make it easier for our end user. From a McTish perspective, we talk about transparency and adding value. It's about leveraging the technology and driving compliance to the end user. Everyday actions, engaging the team without them even knowing. In fact, we don't just want to engage them, we want to drive additional value through things like the utilization of metadata, enterprise search. Our focus is to make it easier for them to do their jobs whilst maintaining that records compliance. So to one of the key questions, what's the difference between Content Manager and RecordPoint? Whilst both have many features, at a high level, I would describe it like this. Content Manager is largely a centralized records management approach and typically requires the end user to engage directly with or through the software. RecordPoint, or Records 365 as the other option, is an in-place records management approach focused on federating the content to provide a central view but leaving it in place. From Records 365 perspective, this is 100% transparent to the end user. They just continue using their standard interfaces. So I'm going to stop prattling on for a second and let's start seeing how these solutions work with Office 365 in capturing records. I'm going to pass over to Kylie now, who's going to kick off with a demonstration of the Content Manager 9.2 and integrations with Office 365. Kylie.
Good morning, everybody. What I'm going to be showing you is just the integration between Content Manager and Office 365, and I'm going to be looking at SharePoint at the moment. So basically, users can use the SharePoint and Office 365 however they wish to. There's a few ways to get your documents into Office 365 SharePoint. So for example, you might have a Word document here, and you're just typing away and you're ready to save it. You can save it directly into SharePoint and Office 365. Don't need to drag and drop if you don't wish to. And I'll just call it test document 1.20. And I'll just save my document. I've now directly saved that into my SharePoint environment. I've just got to wait for it to upload. There it is. Not going to make any further changes at this point in time. And if I go into the document library I've actually saved that into, you can see that sitting right there. To an end user, they just save their documents into their little document library and forget about it. Other ways you can get your documents in there is via drag and drop, or you can actually do what's called an upload via the files. However, I've put my document into the document library because this is currently integrated with Content Manager. Just going to refresh my screen. After a couple of minutes, I'll find that this will automatically get managed for me. So Content Manager knows about it, but the document is remaining in SharePoint. Don't have to do anything with it. With the drag and drop, I'll just grab a document and drag and drop it in. Pop the training schedule in there today. I'll just refresh my screen again, and my test document 21 automatically has a record number. It has now been managed by Content Manager, and I've done nothing to it. I'm just an end user getting my documents into SharePoint. And to prove that, I can just quickly open up Content Manager. I will do my little date registered today search. I've been a bit busy today. I've got a few items in there. And there's my test document 21. End user will not see this. They're just concerned about getting their stuff into the place they want to save it and actually use it. From here, I can edit it either in Word or Word Online, and my changes get captured as per normal inside Office 365. I've got my library set up at the moment, so the end user does nothing. However, if they really, really wanted to, they can manually manage it themselves. Under the Files ribbon, you'll see there's a HPE Content Manager ribbon drop-down sitting there. They can also finalize their documents, which will make them read-only. They can also archive their documents, which will make them managed, read-only, and relocate them into Content Manager, therefore removing them out of the Office 365 space. Or they can do a relocation once it's managed, which means it'll just get removed out of the Office 365 space and be solely managed by Content Manager. If you have existing records already sitting in Content Manager, you can expose them back into the Office 365 SharePoint space. And to the end user, they just see their document sitting in SharePoint. And from here, they can make changes to the documents, they check them out, make the change, and this is all captioned from both angles. Content Manager will also integrate with your OneDrive in the Office 365 space. So if you have a OneDrive, you can just jump into your OneDrive, add documents however you wish to add documents in there. However, you do need to return over to the classic OneDrive to be able to use the integration. I've got my OneDrive set up at the moment for manual management. However, you can make this automatic, so whenever something goes into your OneDrive, Content Manager will automatically capture it without the end user aware of it. The OneDrive, it can be selective on what gets managed. You don't have to do that for everybody, but it is preferred to possibly, if OneDrive is very heavily used, to put automatic management on everybody's OneDrive so items can be captured. Once you're in classic SharePoint, you can actually go over and if you wanted to manually manage, there is your drop-down menu there. Another option you can do with the Content Manager integrated with the Office 365 SharePoint space is you can actually use it within Teams. So if you have a Teams space in Office 365 that you're utilizing, you can jump into your Teams environment. Any information or document that is used in that Teams environment can also be managed either manually or automatically. Once again, mine is currently set up to automatic management, but the same principles apply. You put your documents inside Teams, the rest takes control of it, takes care of itself. So for example, if I select that particular document there, once again, if I do want to manually look after this, I do have to open it into SharePoint. And then from here, I can just select the item and I can manage any selected item manually if I wish. Like I said, this can be automatically created for you. And the other bugbear that we all have is your emails. We know there are various ways to get your emails into SharePoint. You can do the old drag and drop. So you can just copy your email from your Outlook. Go back into my SharePoint environment so I know where I'm putting it. Make sure you are in the right document library in SharePoint. Paste my email wherever I need to paste it and I can drag and drop it in. That's one way. And of course that can be annoying if you've got a lot of emails you want to get into SharePoint. Another option is you can take your email directly into Content Manager utilizing the Content Manager integration. So you can open up your email and have a read of it, and from the Content Manager ribbon, you can check it in. You will get asked for your record type, which is your profile form that you will need to complete, and it goes through the motions of saving it in. And being Content Manager, in your subject line, you will see HPE CM. In my case, I'm using Content Manager 9.2. If that is saved into a folder or a container that gets exposed back into the Office 365 space, in that document library, you'll see that email will actually appear. And I've got an email sitting right there. The other option or way to get your information into the Office 365 space is you can use a third-party product. In my case here, I'm actually using one called InmailX. Now what I can do is I can open up my email, and using InmailX, I can do a close and file. This allows me to navigate through to the SharePoint environment that I wish to put it into, and do a file and close. And what it actually does, it'll put a copy into SharePoint, and if I want to file it into multiple locations, I can. Another cool way is you can actually do a file on send, basically. So you'd open up your new email. I'll send myself an email. And when I do a send, I can do a send only. I can do a send in quick file and file it to my favorites, which as you can see here is in SharePoint, Office 365. Or I can just do a send in file and then I can go and pick and choose. I've also got a send guard on in my InmailX at the moment, just double checking my recipients or my attachments as I send it. And now I've got the option I can send it directly into SharePoint if I wish. So down here I've actually got SharePoint, there's my repository. I have some shortcuts. I'll go into my ECM share. I haven't been in there today, so it's going to take a couple of seconds to come up. And and there's my library right there. I can select that and I can move it and I can do a send and file. In a minute or so, if I go back into my SharePoint environment, refresh my screen, that email will actually pop up. There it is right there. So now that it's actually been put into my Office 365 SharePoint environment, which is being managed by Content Manager behind the scenes, because this is automatically happening, the user doesn't need to do anything. They just get it in there and it all happens all by itself. Now, using the integration between Content Manager and the SharePoint Office 365 environment, there are a few things you need to be aware of. For example, once Content Manager has managed your document, you lose your SharePoint collaboration options, because the Content Manager rules actually take over. There is no flag to advise when new sites or new document libraries are created, so the administrator needs to be aware of when new document libraries are created, so the integration can be set up accordingly. There is no dashboard to easily see what's going on inside the environment. The best setup is a simple setup. Have automatic management going on. You can also have the relocation, the finalize, and the archive set up to automatically happen at a specified time in the future. So for example, if a document hasn't been modified in 12 months, it can be automatically relocated. One thing to be aware of that is once it's relocated, there's nothing left in SharePoint. You don't know it actually existed because it's been removed. Also, you do need a third-party product to get your emails into SharePoint, but we all know SharePoint, Office 365 in general, and Outlook don't get on very well, so we all knew that. And another thing you need to be mindful of is basically one document library does equal one term in the BCS. So if you have multiple folders created inside your document library, they can be created as individual containers inside Content Manager. However, they will all be sitting under the same term in your business classification scheme. And you still need to make sure you try and stay across the creation of also new repository site collections and the document library so you can make sure that integration is actually turned on. That was a really brief, hopefully informative rundown on how Content Manager works with the Office 365 SharePoint space and how users can use the SharePoint inside Office 365 without having to do anything, and the documents still get all managed and looked after properly. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to throw over to Michelle, and she will go through the RecordPoint side of things for you.
I'm actually just trying to get my screen to share, if you just give me a second.
There you go, Michelle. You're now presenter.
No problem. Everybody can see that on the screen, I'm assuming? Okay, so I'm going to talk about the integration of SharePoint and RecordPoint, which is pretty, well, to be honest, it's pretty simple. For records people, it is quite different to how Content Manager works because you set everything up in RecordPoint to point back to SharePoint, and no matter what is done in SharePoint, you can make sure that it is captured. So works very similar on everything that Kylie showed you. SharePoint is obviously a universal tool, so how it works, if I will just show you some of the information I've already got in here. This site here, just so you know, has got, as you can see, 2 libraries. For those of you who do know SharePoint, there may be some who don't. So I'll just go in. And going here. You'll see there's a document, and this library is managed by RecordPoint. If I show you how you would notice that, you can actually find it quite easily. In here, you'd go into Advanced and have a look at a record summary. That is how you'll know that the document you are looking at is managed by RecordPoint. But if I go into documents over here, this library, I'll just show you that for a second. So our computer's just decided to freeze. Here we go. This library is actually not managed by RecordPoint. So this is where one of the benefits of RecordPoint is you can have libraries managed and you can have libraries that are not managed. So just to show you how that would look, these documents here were put in by me into a library that has no rules engine running on it. So as you're used to a rules engine managing your documents, nothing is in here. But what does happen is if I come up to this tab up the top and just have a look at RecordPoint for a minute, it's identified it. It's actually letting you know that you have 188 records that you've classified, but at some point someone's added 3 documents that are now unclassified records. So this is the dashboard for RecordPoint. This is where you can actually see everything that's going on, what's expired, what files are there, what files are either being requested for loan or if they're overdue to come back. This is the rules engine that you can quite easily see what patterns and rules you have. That's what they're called in RecordPoint to manage the documents. If I just come in here and show you one for a moment, I'm going to go into clients. The cool thing about SharePoint is the ability to drag and drop, as I'm sure a lot of you are quite aware of that. If I just go and open my Explorer for a moment, I've had a bit of a fun time creating some Ipsen documents. So if you just hold on for a minute, I'll move them up so you can see, just so we've got some. I'm going to move this document in, and I'm going to move a PowerPoint document in. So these documents actually now sitting in SharePoint. What will happen in the background, because this is the library that is managed, it will sit here, RecordPoint will grab it, and if we just go over here, it may take a while, obviously with the connection, but you'll be able to see them appear. That library is managed as a classified record. They will start appearing in here. So those 2 documents eventually, as I said, we'll come back and have a look at that in a moment. It's the same as what Kylie had mentioned about OneDrive and Teams. You are able to manage your content whether it's in OneDrive or Teams. One of the good things about RecordPoint is you can capture things right at a very high level. So if you wanted to manage it from this site level up the top here, so if this was your URL, you can point RecordPoint at that and say everything that is under here will be managed. You also have by default the ability to exclude areas to be managed for whatever reason. You may have working documents or ephemeral documents that you don't need managed. You can exclude them sort of by exception if you wish. You have one of the things you do have in here. I was going to go through the OneDrive and the Teams, but I think because Kylie's probably gone through that, unless you would like me to, more than happy. They work very similarly. Anything that you put in to any location in SharePoint, whether it's in the OneDrive space that's managed or the Teams space that's managed, will get picked up by RecordPoint and managed as a record, as long as you have the rules running there for it. As I said, if you don't, they'll come up as unclassified, and you're able to actually go in then and manually manage it from here. Bearing in mind, no one in SharePoint will be aware that anything that they've put in here is managed. They have no way of noticing that. If you ever did require to see, is this document managed? I'd like to see if it's got a record number, for instance. You can come in here. This is all permissions based as well. Not everybody will have the ability to go into what they have here, which is a record summary. What that does, it shows you the record number in what the RecordPoint number has, what RecordPoint has written back as a record number. Here you are. Shows you the record number, what type of record it is. Now this can be a record, a box, or a file as well, so you can refer to it as you like. What classification it's been given. The fact that it is a stub in RecordPoint, now I just allude to what Kylie said earlier, that once you finalize, I think in Content Manager, you cannot see it in SharePoint anymore. The difference with this, with RecordPoint, is what it does, it finalizes the document into RecordPoint, but still leaves a trace that it was in SharePoint in some form. So you still are able to track that the document was there, and then obviously as a records manager, if you needed to reinstate it, be able to do that. But it doesn't just disappear, it still allows everybody to be able to see that it was there. Tells you what the disposal action is. All of this is set up in RecordPoint. As a records manager, that might be pretty good for you to be able to have a quick glance at what rule has been applied to a specific record. One of the other things in SharePoint, if you are SharePoint, if you do have a lot of knowledge of SharePoint, is the ability to actually create what they call content types. Now, at the moment in here, this is just a library where you can put information in, and RecordPoint's managing that library. But what you can do is actually start identifying specific content types that you want managed a different way. Projects or legal agreements or things like that can all sit in the one library, be attached to a content type, and the rule will run depending what you've identified that this is. Now, if that doesn't make any sense, I'm more than happy to draft a couple of notes so you can see that. If you've got templates, you can identify them as templates and have them managed a different way. If you've got legal agreements, HR agreements, anything like that, can all sit in the one library and have 4 or 5 different rules running across the one location, which is actually quite cool. So that's a RecordPoint SharePoint integration piece that works really well. Let's see if those documents have arrived here. Fingers crossed, everybody. They have. There they are. So we have 190 classified records. So those are the 2 I put in there before. If I just click on that, you can actually go in. For some of you, if you've never seen RecordPoint's dashboard, it's actually pretty good. From a records point of view, it enables you to see rules, look at disposals and batches as well. I'm just waiting for it to come up. A moment, please. There we go. So this is you having a look at all the records. Here's our record classifications that we had already uploaded into RecordPoint. And it's very similar to how HPE Content Manager works. Here are our documents. Here is our record number, all the different record numbers for everything that we have managed. And you can come down into things like this as a records manager or someone who's interested in the records. You can resentence the item. So if for some reason, if there's been a manual change to something or someone's put the wrong information in, you can come in and resentence it. You can resubmit it. You can look at all the metadata that is attached to that document, who created it, where it was. It's quite a long list of things you can see. Any of the specific metadata attached to a document will appear here. So that might be quite interesting for a lot of people who need to see that information in the back. If I just show you a quick, I'm going to go back to here, and working with email as well, it doesn't matter how an email goes in. If it's a project, if we work on the rules for project, for instance, maybe if your rule of thumb is keep something that's project related for 7 years, if I have I'm just going to come down to my email and open it. Apologies, it's not all coming up here so you can actually see it. Here it is here. I can save my attachments from here if I wanted to, so I can go save as. One of the cool things about integration with Office and of anything Microsoft, Microsoft as it loves to share its knowledge with everybody, is the ability to go and navigate to areas where you've been working in before. So if I was in RecordPoint, this is my SharePoint site. I can open that up and I can say, well, I want to put it into, sorry, let's go into RecordPoint. I want it to put in my client library. I'm going to put it here and I'm going to put it in project. This is just my attachment, for instance, out of an email. Double click it. There it is, and save. It will add that to my project space if I just press F5. Whoop. And refresh it. Let's just have a look. And here it is. I'll be able to add my attachment, but one of the other things you can do, and this is as Kylie alluded to with InMailX that she was using, you may not have a mail client that allows you to do that, and anything in Outlook, you can go File, Save As, and it'll save it as a message. One of the cool things you might just notice is that it goes, well, hang on, you were just working in here. Do you want me to save it in that same space because I need it all together? And I can hit save. And it will save the email into the project space as well. You can separate the attachments out. I can open it like a normal email. If I open it, it'll open it as a message in Outlook. I'm pretty I think I've actually finished showing you a lot of the stuff that you can do, because as I said, Kylie's covered a lot of the OneDrive and Teams. All of it is manageable. As long as it's in a URL, RecordPoint can point what they call a rule at it, and you can apply your rules, and you can manually apply rules as well, not from here. So the user wouldn't be able to actually go in and apply a rule or make it managed as a record in any shape or form. You as a records manager or someone who has access to RecordPoint would be the ones who would go in here, would go to the unclassified record or to the classified record and reclassify it. That is actually how it ends up working. And you can see RecordPoint's picked up that I added something else as a classified record. So I think I've pretty much covered some of the integration pieces between SharePoint and RecordPoint. I'm not sure if there's anything anybody wants to call up in chat or send us, have a chat to us off once I'm finished. And if there's anything else I can show, I'd be glad to do it. Thanks very much. Kylie, over to you.
Thanks, Michelle, for
Darren, thank you.
going through that demo.
Thank you.
Guys, I've had a number of questions come through. Some of them are quite specific to particular integrations as well. So we might cover those offline. One of the questions we do get often, or we're getting more frequently, I should say, is given that Office 365 now has sort of inbuilt records management capability, what is the need for some of the historical or external records management systems or EDRMSs? The reality is Office 365 does some of the heavy lifting. However, the system and the way it's configured is not compliant to the standards we're required to adhere to here in Australia. It also requires a significantly higher license type within Microsoft. But if you do want some more detail on the gaps within the Office 365 records management suite, please give one of our team a call and we'll talk you through it in detail. It's certainly a question that gets raised often from IT teams through to records now, given that Microsoft obviously push their wares so vehemently. Guys, we've taken just a little over 40 minutes of your time today, and I really appreciate everyone attending. We'll wrap that up there. As I say, please reach out to us if you've got any questions around Office 365, RecordPoint, or Content Manager, or any of our other information management solutions. I'd like to thank my team for pulling everything together and doing the presentation today, and thank everyone for their time on this beautiful Friday morning. Thank you.